Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Anand. It's such a pleasure to have you with us at SpeakIn. We take pride in reaching out, talking to and connecting with thought leaders like yourselves. But when the thought leader is of your stature, it's a different evening altogether. So I'll just take a moment to do a quick introduction for yourselves, Anand. You've traveled, a phenomenal journey at such a young age, from being a chartered accountant, being a double management graduate, being a BCom honors person as well. I don't know how much a person can study at that young age, and then you've achieved feats from PwC to Mahindra Satyam to Novartis, and now at Merck India, where you are heading the organization. We, Anand, will talk today about leadership, how you've traveled this journey to this date, and of course, as you were talking about the new normal, how the leadership will change going forward as well. So thank you so much once again for joining us, Anand. I welcome you with your opening thoughts on your journey as a leader to date.
Thank you so much, Deepshika. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here today with SpeakIn. And leadership is a topic which I'm very, very passionate about myself. And for me, it's when you guys reached out, I was absolutely delighted because I love speaking about this topic. It's very close to heart. And I'm really looking forward today. On the journey itself, and I was thinking about it, as you were just asking me that question. The leadership journey actually started a bit before I started working. And with your permission, I'll just share this small, a bit of that background. It started way back in school. It was in the final year of school. And, in schools, you are in these different houses, right? And then I was in this one house, which was actually always the laggard, always used to come right behind. And it was an amazing story that, we never had won the all-round shield for 20 years. And I was one of the people who was actually leading. I was not the house captain, but I was one of the guys who was actually leading this entire group. And actually, my house captain came to me and said, Anand, can you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G? I said, why not? And it was amazing because we didn't have the best teams. We didn't have the best players. But the whole team chipped in. And to me, that was the starting point wherein I actually believed in this entire concept that, it's the team that wins. It's not a leader or an individual, right? The leader typically, guides, coaches, and is able to show the direction. But it's the team that comes together. And that's the immense power of the team that comes together. But that's just a bit about where it started. For me, it was all around, I started thinking big, actually. I think that's something that you need to start thinking big. And after I finished my chartered accountancy, I still remember that day when I actually filled up one organizational form for recruitment. They used to have a manual form which you would actually fill out. And there was a question out there, which they asked this, any other questions? And I actually went down and I wrote down in that space, I said, can a chartered accountant become the CEO of the company? And when I went for the interview, I was actually grilled by that person just on that question. He didn't even ask me anything. He straight away went to that question and then he caught hold of me completely. And then he told me, no, you should not be thinking about this. And I'm glad I didn't get that job. But to me, when I reflect back, I think it all starts with thinking about that goal. It does materialize. And when I'm looking at it in context now, I think it did happen. The second one to me that really think when I'm looking back at my journey is the entire element of curiosity. So after I became a chartered accountant, I said, okay, no, let me try to become a startup entrepreneur. So I decided to become an entrepreneur for some time. I burnt my fingers. I learned a bit through that. I lost a lot through that in terms of financial money. And in fact, my dad bailed me out of that venture. But that was a big learning also for me. It's also this ability to step out, right, out of your comfort zone, do something different. Yesterday, I was talking to one of my mentors, and he was telling me this very same thing. He said that, when you step out of your comfort zone, it is of immense value. It's 2 times the value, or 3 times, or even 4 times the value of what would have happened if you wouldn't have done that. And so for me, I think that is another key element. Personally, I always had a startup bug in me, and I still do have a startup bug in me. So whenever I'm looking out for these challenges and I've got this thing buzzing in my head, I want to do something different, then I'll go and grab maybe something that it's an opportunity that might be look quite difficult. So after PwC, after the entrepreneurship stint, actually, I got risk averse. I went back to PwC. I worked with them for some time. And then again, there was a startup bug, which actually took me to Satyam, the CFO there, asked me, do you want to come and do some interesting stuff? And I said, why not? So I actually got into a startup environment again. I was like employee number 5 for their BPO arm. And by the time I went to ISB to do my MBA, they had close to 5,000 employees. And I had seen the whole works, right from raising capital, private equity route, raising debt financing, mezzanine financing, all the things in finance that you would love to do as a young guy. I learned it before I went to B school. And when I went to B school, again, this entire thing was, again, shift track. Like it was, I had a job to go back, and I'm glad I didn't go back. But I moved again. So I moved out to pharma, which was a completely unknown field for me. The initial experience in pharma itself was a bit of a culture shock for me, because things from IT to pharma, you suddenly slow down in terms of everything, right? From decision making to processes, everything moves at a very different pace, and it's for a very good reason. But again, that ability to take those steps, to go and explore those uncharted territories is super critical. And so that was, so for me, this first foundation that I had in Satyam, wherein it was about, learning a lot of stuff about, how the startup business works, moving into a big pharma multinational organization, which teaches you about structure, processes, right? And again, 2 years down the line, I did multiple things. So not only in finance, I actually went and carried a bag as a sales rep. So I said I wanted to do something different. So I went and carried a sales rep. I was an area manager for some time. And then I got an opportunity to switch again. And this was the big one, Deepshika, because it was actually a career step down that I took, but it was a move to Singapore. And at that time, in my CV, I didn't have any manufacturing experience. And again, I was again, talking to a mentor, and this is where, having a good mentor is so valuable. So I had this guy in the US who was working with Novartis, and he looked at my CV and he told me that, Anand, you don't have manufacturing experience. And if you want to do it early in your life, not late. And when this came up, I spoke to him and I told John, what do you suggest? Because this is something that's coming, but it looks like a step down to me, and I want to move up, and actually I'm moving down. And he said, take it, because, typically you will find that there's a lot of dirt. I'm using the word dirt instead of another word, but there's a lot of dirt always to clean up. And that's the opportunity for you. And to me, that was the real big game changer for me. One, it actually got me out of the country. So I went into a new place, an unknown place. It's a difficult environment to live in, actually, if you're starting off. I had a family. My wife was expecting. With all that, I just plunged into it. And I had just lost my dad then. So there was that additional pressure too to stay back. But my mom just helped me, and she said, move ahead. If you think that this is the right thing to do, go ahead. We'll support you. So another big thing is your family, your support system around you is extremely important in your career. That exposure was the transformational point, because when I went there, first of all, I got a lot of visibility into senior management, because when you are working in a regional role, you start getting that visibility. And when you start performing, people start noticing. And obviously I was delivering, and that moved from one to another. Then I became the regional head of planning and analysis, and then the Merck opportunity happened again, right? So again, here it was about continuing in Novartis and do something else. And I've been fortunate to have good mentors right through. At Novartis, I had the global CFO. He was mentoring me. And I was actually asked to move to South Africa. And I declined that opportunity. I said no to that opportunity. And typically what happens in a multinational setting is that when you are put into a role or assigned, you're on a path, it also means that there are a lot of other people who are dependent on your move. So if you move, somebody else moves into your role, somebody else moves into that role. That's how it works. And since I had just had a child, then my wife didn't want to move to Johannesburg. I declined that. But that kind of in a way stalled my progression there. And the CFO, who was my mentor, he told me, he said, now you are kind of back in the queue. But again, this is where, you have some great leaders who actually are not holding on to you. He told me that, if you find something great, go for it, right? Don't step out of the company just to use it as a stepping stone. But when you go out of a company, prove yourself, right? Show that you made the moves. And then whenever you want, you come back. So even today, I know that I have a bridge out there, which I've not burnt. There's good access there. And that advice went very well for me because I moved to Merck, larger responsibility. It's a different culture, a German culture. Again, I was working in a Swiss company. This is a bit of a different culture. Again, I was very, very skeptical about moving into a German company, my first German company. But again, that's where when you're getting exposed to different experiences, you're growing as an individual, growing as a person. And I started off managing in Asia Pacific geography, which was excluding China and Japan. And then I started leading a larger team, including China and Japan. And then again, this entire thing about me, for me, it was deciding between going to Germany to take on something more better in finance or doing something else. And that's when I was having a discussion with your manager, and I said, why not general management? And that's when this entire IMD, EMBA happened, wherein, go do the drill there and, get yourself equipped. People actually, a lot of people laughed at me when I signed up for that course. They said, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to prove a point? And for me, it was just that pedagogy of the course itself that I said, no, I think I need to do this, right? If I'm going to step into general management, right, I think this is the best place where I'm going to get a flavor of what, global leadership is about, because the average age of the class was 55. So you have senior leaders there with so much of wealth of experience. And I went there and I actually realized that that was one of the wisest decisions I made. Ironically, when I passed out of ISB, my wife asked me this question. She said, are you going to stop studying? And I don't know, I told her, no, maybe in 10 years' time, I'll need a reboot. And that's what happened. I actually rebooted myself in 10 years. So that experience to me has benefited me immensely. It was entirely experiential. It was not something that is all classroom and book-based learning. And then took on this challenge. And again, you start growing in the role, Deepshika. That's the key thing. It's the journey. And it's not the events, what you do. It's the journey that you take. I think that's the key learning that happens. And even today, I think, I am still learning. In today's context, I think so leadership gets so much more amplified because, it brings in this entire concept of servant leadership, because leaders need to push the envelope in terms of supporting people to get to where they want to get. And I think in this situation is the best opportunity for leaders to do that. So that's a bit about my journey, and clearly there were quite a few risks that I did take. To me, that one big risk was actually taking a step down. I took a step down, but I got back, and I got back a lot faster. I think that's what I took away from that entire thing. So even this India move that happened for me was a big decision because, family is well settled here in Singapore, and then I need to move to India. Do I do it? Not. But again, you need to keep pushing yourself outside the comfort zone.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful context, Anand. Now, let me move to the second part of the conversation. Now, that was your journey to becoming a leader. There are a lot of people waiting, as they were waiting in the wings to join the webinar. There are a lot of people waiting in the wings. And clearly, it's a pyramid, right, which is very, very thin at the top. So what do you think, Anand, that, over your journey, or what have you seen? I mean, of course, there's one that you mentioned that, there was a job that happened, and then probably what you felt in the interview during the fitment itself, what did work out, and thankfully not so. Whereas when you joined Mahindra Satya, you found it far more entrepreneurial and then going forward. So there is one systemic part of it, right? I mean, the system itself encourages you to be more entrepreneurial, accountability, responsibility, and so on and so forth. And then there is an entire personal driven side of it. You drive yourself to achieve things. What is your recommendation on both fronts? So one is to create an environment where you are building those entrepreneurs, building people like yourselves who take on the responsibility, drive and deliver results. And secondly, what do individuals themselves need to do to become and ask for more? Not just become a 9-to-5 employee, but ask for more and then therefore drive more for yourselves as well as for the company.
So I'll come to that environment part, the second part, and maybe I'll come to the first part is, for people, who are looking to grow and, want to scale up. I think it starts with, doing what you love. I think that's the key thing. You need to start enjoying what you're doing, because as your responsibilities grow, the ask on you also grows. So there's a lot more of energy that you will have to expend out as you start taking on more responsibilities, right? Time is always limited, but there are a lot more decisions that you're going to make. So you'll not have the luxury to, let's say, have 6 hours to have a complete analysis and then go ahead and make a decision. You might have to make a decision in 5 minutes. So when you're enjoying what you're doing, I think one of the good things that happens is that you stay energized. I've often seen I've seen folks, who are, doing something just for the sake of doing it. And they're not really enjoying that stuff. And that to me, that is a bit of a hurdle and a derailer. So one is you need to enjoy what you're doing. The second one is, set yourself a goal. And I think that looking out 10 years or 20 years is quite tough. At least for, let's say, the people who are starting out early right now, right? And for them to look out that much ahead might be a bit difficult. But looking out into the next 5 years, that's a good starting point. If tobacco growers in Guntur can predict the tobacco yield for the next 5 years, I think we, as well-read individuals, professionals, I think we should be able to forecast at least where we want to go in that next 5 years, the 3-year milestone. So set those milestones. I think that is also another very powerful way to get to where you want to get to. Look at it as a journey. I think that's another thing, because sometimes you end up taking a longer path, but you get to your goal. Your career is like a river. It's flowing. And it will get to its end goal, which is the sea or wherever it has to get to eventually. Now, even if there's a mountain in between, the river is either going to cut through the mountain or it's going to find a way around it, but it will get to the sea. So don't get hassled about it, right? Like you're not getting this next promotion or your next job, the big job that you wanted. I think, are you growing as an individual or are you growing as a professional? That is the more important part. And last I would say is, take control. Often, and this is what we see, and this is more specific also in an Indian context, I've seen that it's culturally there, wherein historically the things have been very hierarchical. So there's always this expectation at a junior level that my manager is going to do something for me, he will take me up, and that's how it works. But we need people to start taking control of their careers. They need to start navigating it themselves. And this could mean that, if I need to get to point A, right? And if, let's say, the highway number 1 is blocked, I may need to take a highway number 2. So what are the options you have to get there? And these could be longer detours. These could be, job switches. These could be functional role switches that you might have to do. But you need to have that openness, and you need to be in control of your career. So that's a bit, I would say, and I'm happy to answer any more questions, Deepshika. I've just kept it to those 4 points right now. There are a lot of behavioral, obviously, from a behavioral perspective, I think that's something that, you need to build. And I can speak a bit about the leadership behaviors. 3 things that I really always love to focus on is about showing your vulnerability, which is, leaders need to show their vulnerability, and leaders often don't like to show their vulnerability. Right? It's okay to make mistakes, because by that you are able to connect with the rest of the people. They need to show empathy also at the same time, right? But when you overdo that empathy piece, then you actually get into, oh, goody good. But it's just about how do you maintain that balance. And the last one is about, staying in your role, making those hard decisions when it's needed. And as a leader, you will have to balance between these 3. Often what happens is people tend to get into one kind of a corner, and then they are overcompensating through that behavior, which can be a bit detrimental. So as a leader, you need to stay a bit balanced. On the environment itself, right, that I'm trying to create out at Merck and in India right now, it's focused around maybe a few themes, right? Obviously, one is clear transparency and trust. So there's a lot of trust and transparency that's there across the organizations. I am trying to role model that myself. I'm expecting my leadership team and the teams below to role model that, so that, people feel more empowered also. The other one is around giving people that responsibility also. So, and holding them accountable. You will be surprised actually when you actually entrust people with a responsibility and hold them accountable, they will deliver. You might believe it, you might be thinking they won't, but they often do deliver. So you need to start giving them, and if they fail, it's okay. Fail one time, try not to repeat it. So learn from that and move ahead. So that's the kind of environment you want to. You want to create a coaching culture. That's a very important piece also, Deepshika, which is around. It's different from mentoring. So it's about the fact that every human brain is unique. Every brain is unique. It's going to behave or react in a very different way to a situation. After all, we are all a function of our own experiences. For the last 40 years, whatever I've gone through and I've learned as a child, I've been exposed to as a child, is also determining the way I'm reacting right now on this webinar, how I'm speaking. So we need to acknowledge and appreciate that. And that's where it becomes very important, is that, when you shift from a telling culture, when you start, instead of telling people what to do, you start asking them the right questions. That can be a lot more powerful. So that's also something that, helps create good leaders.
So, Anand, I'll just ask you a leading question. You talked about coaching culture, not mentoring culture. And I think they're both different, as you rightly pointed. And you also mentioned that mentorship was a very critical part of your journey when you were growing. So one question is, when is it too late to find a mentor? Or when is it ever too late to find a mentor? I mean, I'm a manager, I'm an assistant manager, or I'm just an executive. Do I need a mentor? I need to be a CEO to find a mentor for myself. So what is the right stage? And 2 is, what is the importance and efficacy of having a mentor, either within the organization or outside of it?
So the right time, there's no right time. I think so. Every time is the right time. So you can't wait for that perfect moment. And, there's no moment when it's too late, I would say. As you're seeing in these COVID times right now, I think you must have read, like in the US, there are the veterans who are being retrained to do stuff like coding and programming and stuff also. So people can learn as long as they put in that effort. So it's a bit of a mindset thing to me. So there's no wrong time to get a mentor. What the mentor can do, and I think that's where, the subtle difference between mentoring and coaching. The mentor can share his experiences, but I think where the watch out is that, if the mentor gets into telling the mentee to this A, B, C, D, and the coachee buys that, or the mentee buys that and says that, okay, that's the way to success, they might get disappointed. So, you need to find the right mentor. I think that is the key thing. Finding the right person who can be a mentor, who can be a sounding board, who's doing less of the talking but is asking the right questions of you. I think those are the people who can really add value to you. I had a boss whom I also regard very highly from a leadership perspective, and I had some great experiences wherein he would just ask me questions to get me thinking. You need to reflect, you need to understand the situation you were in or whatever, how you behaved. And then when you have a eureka, right? When your eyes go up wide and say, now I know what went wrong. And I have a solution also now to fix it. That's when that change happens. Not when somebody tells that, okay, Deepshika, I think you did this is wrong. You need to do it like this. You will listen to it, but you've not internalized it. Unfortunately, but getting a good mentor is not that easy. That's the tough part.
Absolutely. Getting a mentor is more of a journey and a fitment over a period of time. It doesn't happen overnight. So fantastic. I've taken 3 very, very critical takeaways from your conversation, and we'll use it for a further conversation as well. Anand, now take me to, when I talk to leaders like of your stature, you always make it sound so easy. You talked about some personal challenges, you talked about your drive yourselves, but it was very easy the way you talk it. I did this, and therefore I'm here. All of that happened. There are a lot of challenges which are not in plain eyesight. Tell us something about those challenges that you have faced and how did you overcome it in your journey, and then we will talk about the current and the future that we will be looking at as well.
So I've had many failures in life. Right? I'm not going to talk through all those failures, but I can tell you in my personal life I've had failures. In my professional life I've had failures. In my school life I've had failures also. And it's about what you do with that, and I think when you start looking at your life journey, right, it's not an up and down. It's actually, if you look at it, it's a curve that's always moving up. As long as you're looking at those experiences, those challenges as opportunities to learn and move up, it's not that you're coming down and then going up. You're actually moving up. It's always like an index, but it's going up in one direction. And coming back to the challenges itself, right? So challenges, in fact, today we had a leadership team call and I was just sharing my feeling with them. And I was telling them that, we started off the year with a bang and it was just, and I used this analogy. I said, for us, it was like a bit of a Chandrayaan mission, right? We started off, the rocket launched and it looked like, we have gotten to our moonshot or whatever, right? And then suddenly 2 months down the line, this entire COVID thing happens. It's unexpected. And things get derailed, right? It's like a snag in the rocket. 3 months down the line, the snag is still there, right? So we've lost March, 10 days of March, April, May, gone. And still the challenge is there, right? And we didn't anticipate this to be so big. I didn't anticipate it to be so big also. And I think this is where, when these challenges come, it's about how you react to them. You need to quickly acknowledge if something's gone wrong and then move fast into action. I think that's one thing that's needed. In a pandemic kind of a situation, it's essentially like a crisis that you're managing. And I know companies have taken different approaches. Pharma is that way a bit insulated. So whenever a recession comes or such challenges come, it's the last industry to get impacted. And then when the recession goes out also, it's one of the last industries to get out of it also. But other companies like, Swiggy and stuff have had to actually lay off people, right? But if you were reading between those fine lines, I think Swiggy was a great example there, where they actually said, like, we are unfortunately asking people to go, but we're giving them time. So it was not about pushing people off the bus. It was about how they did it. So they were actually trying to help people get off at the next bus stop. So they had some compensation and stuff like that, and whatever in their means they could do. And I think this is where leadership stands out, right? How they adapt to those situations. And the other one is also around when these challenges come up, you have to. One of the biggest difficulties is in the decision making piece, right? In a normal working day, you can actually go out and make a lot of decisions based on gut. And 9 times out of 10, for an experienced professional who's been through that, many times, they'll get it right. So in that short span of time, they're able to make those decisions by gut. But in these crisis situations, unfortunately, you make a decision based on gut and you might get a slap on your face. So what do you do then? You're looking for all the information, but there's no information. And that's where it becomes so difficult. How do you balance it between trying to get enough and sufficient data so that you can make fact-based decisions, which is absolutely critical in this juncture, because you need to start using your head a lot more when you're making these decisions. It's not about bravado. It's not about this, all that. You need to, at times, you might have to show that, but it's a lot about rational thinking, staying calm and composed. Another very important point is being centered in the present, right? I can start, thinking, when is COVID going to go away? What is going to happen 1 month down the line? How bad is the situation going to be? Right now, one of the biggest challenges we have is, for example, the confidence in the patients to come back to the hospitals to get treated is pretty low right now. Like, if I'm going to start, hyperventilating over something that's, happening after 3 months or an event, I don't know that. But I know for certain what's now in my control. So staying centered in the present is also extremely critical. And I think that's also a good sign of a good leader who's able to be centered in that present. Allow other people to take the lead. And this is when the situational leadership piece comes in. You'll find that people who were your blue-eyed boys might actually be taking a back seat. And it's fine. Give them that time and space, but don't go and push them to start up and start running and solving things for you, because actually right now they are maybe in a bit of a state of shock themselves. On the other hand, you'll have people whom you never wanted to take a bet on are already suddenly shining, right? And this challenges actually can throw up, like the COVID situation can throw up surprise leaders for you. So you need to create that space which allows that to happen also. I think that's another piece. So these top three things that come to my mind, Deepshika.
Perfect. That's a phenomenal example, Anand. Now, in terms of, we've just hit the mark for our interaction. And at this point of time, I'll invite a few questions to be shared, and a few which have started coming in. So one of our audience members asks, businesses are, and I think it goes back to your staying calm and, staying in the moment. Businesses are getting hampered and we are running out of patience. According to you, what leadership qualities one should use to weather out of the current pandemic situation?
So, as I said, one is you need to be hyper-aware. It's not easy. When I'm saying hyper-aware, you need to actually really know what's happening. Have your antenna up. And the best people to rely on are your salespeople on the ground, because, they can tell you actually what's happening. And you might not be able to, in such a situation, you might not be able to restart in the COVID situation. Have a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's where that entire flexibility is needed. You might not be able to say that, okay, I'm going to go all India, pan-India, I'm going to open up on this date. No, it's not happening. You might have to get into very specifics. And that's where it's about not just you, it's that entire team, empowering the team also to get out of the situation, to restart. This is something that is key.
Understood.
Did I answer that question completely?
I think yes. So one is empowering, and of course, staying in the moment, which you mentioned earlier as well.
Right.
So another question comes in, and the person asks, being laid off and or affected due to COVID, how do we manage this situation?
It's a difficult time, right? Like when you get laid off, you're without a job. And in the context of people, who have their monthly installments, EMIs and all running, it's not easy. The short answer is it's you need to find another job, right? That's the short answer. We can't just sit back and wait for things to happen. It's not going to happen that way. Nobody's going to come and give it out to you in a plate, right? But also more importantly is that what are you learning from this thing, right? I'm not saying that you'll get something tomorrow if you go and start looking out for a job. You will eventually. So I think that effort has to start, but also the learnings from this particular situation. You need to start reflecting and thinking about it. One of my managers actually gave me this very nice piece of advice. When as a young professional, right, I was very ambitious, right, and I would keep going him and bothering him about what's next. And then one day he called me up and he told me, he said, Anand, I'll give you one piece of, do one thing. You go outside and see what's your value, right? And he told me that, do this frequently. Then you'll know kitne pani mein ho to. So he actually, to me, that piece of advice was also very good, which is, you need to know that there's a market outside for you.
Or not.
Or not, right? And I think when you know that there is not a market for you, that's the eureka you have. If you just sat inside and were waiting for things and then we get laid off and then, okay, now we need to do something about it. Okay, you fix that. But you need to figure out what went wrong.
Agree. So the next question that comes and says that, so I think the person is talking about the team. A person, usually a human being, doesn't want to come out of the comfort zone because of, your environment or how you've been. So how do you deal with people who don't want to come out of the comfort zone?
And as managers, we need to have conversations. So typically we are shying away from having those conversations, giving the feedback. And you need to get those answers out of the person themselves. You need to ask the right questions. So one is when you're giving feedback, the way you do it is very important. And especially when you're going to give tough feedback. In this situation, if a person doesn't want to come out of his or her comfort zone, but thinks that, look here, I need that next big job, I need that promotion. You need to navigate the person by asking the right questions. And you have to come to that point wherein you can actually find the entry door to give the feedback, but also that person is going to be telling you that himself or herself that, I need to do A, B, C, D to get there. And that's that person's eureka moment. And believe me, it can happen. It's doable.
Excellent. Another question comes. Now this is the employee perspective. You have, Anand, have had various transitions in your career. What advice do you have for someone starting out the career in this year, given the circumstances?
Don't let the crisis go waste, I would say. Never let a crisis go waste. Crises don't happen. As much as, I'm saying that, we are in this period where this is happening, it's not great, right? A crisis is not great. So many people are suffering. But what are you doing out of it? What are you learning out of it? And so try to make the most out of it. Get into roles that actually will get you into that heat of the action there, right? And will really push you. Because this learning will never happen again, maybe for another 50 or 100 years. So make the most out of this situation and you will leapfrog then. So don't feel, again, as I mentioned about this down step, right? So don't shy away from those difficult roles. There might be something that's very difficult, but think hard. Do you want that big, fat paycheck salary job? Or do you want to get into a job where actually you're going to gain some tremendous experience and you move on to bigger things in life?
Excellent. Excellent. You want to add on to that, Han? You want to add on to that? You were saying something.
No, I'm good. I think that was it from my side.
Okay. So we have another question coming your way. The person asked, you mentioned how you need to enjoy what you're doing. But, what is the advice that you would give? Because, a lot of times what you like, it is not really very clear. It's not really intuitive that this is what I love and this is what I don't. So how do you figure this out?
Just look at how you feel. I think that entire thing, your ability to step out of yourself and take a view from a balcony. And that's something that also, observe yourself. For example, I'm passionate about this topic, right? When I'm here, I know I'm energized. As much as I might have had a very long day, I'm still feeling very energized now. But then there will be those moments also wherein you're dragging your feet literally, you're not liking it. So I think those are the things that you need to look out for. What energizes you? For me, I'm looking for my energizers. That's what I'm doing. And that gives me a pulse of, okay, this is something that I'm really enjoying. I don't know how time flies. I think those are the signals that you need to look for. Stuff which is actually you're dragging your feet, you're not feeling very good about it. You're looking at your watch and stuff. That's something that then you have to ask yourself, why are you doing that?
Excellent point. Excellent point. So if you're dragging your feet doing something, perhaps that's not what your calling is. And if you forget time, then that's what your calling is. Like you have one with when we're interacting with Anand. So another question comes, Anand. Should one ask for mentorship? Does it always have to be your manager or seniors at work? And how do you know when you have found one?
So I think you need to do your research, right? First of all, to find a right mentor. It starts with setting your goal, right? And let's say that, for example, I want to be a product manager in an FMCG company. I think the starting point is actually to go and talk, not to the hiring manager, but to go and talk to the product manager himself or herself, right? And get a flavor of what he or she is doing. And then that person might become your mentor. But I think that is, first of all, the starting point. Mentors necessarily don't need to be your manager. Your manager has a responsibility to coach you. Manager can be a mentor too, but the primary responsibility is to coach and develop the direct reports. It doesn't have to always be internal. Internal is more convenient because people know you. Often people use mentorship as a networking opportunity to find their next move. And that's why they're not getting the real value of that entire relationship. But internally, if you know that there are good people, then you'll hear it from people. If there are good managers, you'll hear it. The news spreads. This guy is good. You need to go and get, he's a great guy to be a mentor. You'll hear that.
Excellent.
Trial and error. Go and try a bit also. Look externally also. LinkedIn is a great way. You can just cold call somebody and, say that, it's not necessary that everybody is going to accept your request. Somebody might. So I think also that's another way, but it's not easy, I must admit, to find the right mentor.
Excellent. So next question, Anand, and we have more and more and more coming in. We'll keep a watch on the watch. And so as the managing director of an MNC, what is the most challenging task in your hand in the current scenario?
Okay, good one. The most challenging task, of course, is around finding that balance. In this situation, we are trying to balance between, health and safety of colleagues, driving business continuity, and performance. I think finding that balance is the most difficult one. You get pulled into one of the other corners. And it happens to me too. There will be those conversations wherein my eye is more on the numbers and I'm getting dragged into, financial performance. Sometimes, I will be thinking a lot about business continuity, about supply, and we are focusing there. But getting that balance is the most difficult one to me.
Great. So that was a question from Nitesh Sharma. Nitesh, I hope you got your answer. Next question. As the leader of my own life, when do you think it may be too late or a drastic career change if unhappy in your current profession?
Never late. Never late. I'll tell you that. It's never too late. Because once you find that entire sweet spot, your purpose in life, and if it does happen that, you're able to marry your purpose with what you love, and, you're going to be doing that to earn a living, even if it's at 55, why not?
The next question comes, Anand, where they ask, learning leads to desire. It's a very interestingly put together question. Learning leads to desire, and if desire is not fulfilled as per the timelines, it creates worry and stress. What is your advice on this? So
when you're climbing a mountain, right, it's always good to take a pause and look back at how far you've climbed. So don't get. Again, it's about being centered in that moment. That's when if you'll stop midway. I wanted to climb Mount Everest in one day, but one day I'm just done 1,000 meters. But still I've covered 1,000 meters, right? I think take a pause, look back, enjoy that moment. What did you learn? And keep moving ahead. You will get to your goal. Believe me, no one can stop you from getting to your goal. You will get there eventually. Ultimately, life is beautiful. You will get there.
So another question comes and says that, you had the first stint in a startup and perhaps then thought of becoming a risk-averse person again. How did you overcome this risk aversion? And this is something that the person says I'm struggling with right now.
So time is the best healer, right? You had an experience and then you're more cautious. And then you get over it in time. I think for me, it was just about at that moment out there, I got burnt. It was hard. I became quite risk averse.
Great. So Anand, I think this is the last question that we would take as the clock is telling us to hold on. And you're a very busy man who's heading into the late evening. Last question comes from Neha. And Neha asks, what is your opinion on diversity in leadership? And how do you plan to inculcate this more and more into the culture?
I think especially in the traditional industries, right? I think diversity has always been a bit of a challenge. In the new tech industries and the new generation industries, you see that there's a lot more of diversity. It's not just gender diversity, but outside of that also. And here, I think there's a lot to do for pharma companies, specifically when I'm just looking at pharma organizations, right? Because the representation of women, let's say, in the workforce in pharma companies is pretty low. And it's not something that we are proud of. But when I'm comparing, let's say, an India with another country like a Vietnam or a Thailand or even a China, what we see is that the women representation is phenomenal in those countries. Right, and these are also all developing countries. It's not that the work environments are all super. So it's a good question to ask ourselves: why is diversity not as obvious in countries like ours? And this is something that we need to fix because there's a lot of statistics and data that shows us that increased diversity means a lot of good things: more creativity, more innovation, better bottom lines, more engagement, and stuff. So. How do I plan to create that is, to keep driving that agenda, and there has to be a lot of role modeling happening right from the top. I was actually listening into one of the podcasts, and this was done by one of the guys of Coca-Cola. I think it was Coca-Cola who moved to the Middle East. And he was telling me that in the earlier country where he was there, there was a lot of women representation in workforce. And then when he went to this new place, he saw that it was at abysmally low levels. And all he was told by the people was that, look here, this ratio cannot improve. This is how it is in this country. But he made a very conscious call and he said that, look here, when I'm going to be hiring, or my company hires, they'll hire the best candidate. So it's not about a man versus a woman, it's the best candidate. If I have two candidates who are equal and one is a man and one is a woman, I'm going to hire the woman candidate. So now that's, to me, it's about, the leader getting into his role and making a decision. This is how it's going to be. And he said, I stuck with that decision. There were a lot of naysayers. People said it won't work and all that. But then he said, now he was reflecting. He said, now we have come to a ratio wherein we have got equal representation. My organization is more profitable. It's growing like never before. The engagement, everything is wonderful. So leaders need to have that, that gut, that thing that, I'm going to hold by this also. They need to make those decisions also sometimes. And that's where I think in India, in a situation like this, maybe we're not doing enough of that. So yeah, maybe I think I need to do more of that.
So great. I think there's some milestones which are also evolving in developing as situations change, and you're doing a phenomenal job of that. So one question, Anand, I would definitely want to take, and this was something that I was very keen on asking, and thank you for asking this question, MD. MD asks, how has the experience of leading an organization been coming from the finance role? So a finance leader becoming the leader, how has that change happened, and did that add value to you as a leader?
Yeah, so a lot of value actually. To me, this experience has been transformative in a way, because you get to discover yourself. There are so many areas that you never knew about yourself, and I think those are those new things that when you discover and you start realizing that you're actually capable of doing those things, right? It's like, when a baby learns how to walk, like I know how to walk. And that's the beauty of these kind of roles, which, and when you step out of your comfort zones. From finance to general management, I think finance professionals, and especially people who are close to the commercial side, are the closest you can get to commercial without being in commercial. So you have an advantage if you're in the right spot there in finance. I think also finance these days, the CEOs are also mandated a lot to have a strong P&L experience, right? So that's something also that goes well for the finance folks. Now, what sometimes is missing and is often now they get branded is this entire thing around leadership, around people agility, right? And that's where, they miss the trick, and their ability to engage beyond and outside that, in a high touch role. So you need to also be sure. Some people actually enjoy finance a lot, and there's nothing wrong in continuing to do that also, by the way. It's not that, you have to give up and then do something else. But if you think that, you can do it, give it a shot. You need to try. You have to step out, make that opportunity. And more often than not, that's going to happen within your organization. So, for example, if I wanted to step out of Merck and I went to another company and said, hey, give me a general manager job, I wouldn't have got it. Right? So you need to create that base in around where you are, first of all, so that somebody is going to take a bet on you, is willing to take that bet on you. Once you get that opportunity, grab it with both hands.
Great. Perfect. So, another attendee says, thank you very much, and a great session indeed. So that echoes my feeling, Anand, today for having spoken to you. And thank you and your entire team for making today's conversation possible. Thank you, audiences, for being here with us, with Anand. What a lovely interaction. All the best, Anand, for your journey ahead.